Welcome to the Deep Dive.
It's Update Tuesday, May 6th, 2025.
And we're your guides for a sharp look at what's shaping our world today.
We're diving into global economics, the latest from China, some SQ Underground news, and key U.S. developments.
Right. Let's kick off with the global economic picture. Can you give us the detailed briefing?
Okay, let's get into it. Starting in North America, there's a big potential shakeup in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. What's happening?
President Trump announced a 100% tariff on movies made overseas.
100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The idea is, America first, trying to bring film production back home.
And the reaction?
Pretty swift. On Monday, stocks for major players, think Netflix, Warner Bros., Discovery, Paramount, Disney, they all dropped maybe 2 to 3%.
So investors are clearly nervous.
Definitely. It's not just the stock drop, though. It's the potential, fracturing of how movies get made globally.
Yeah.
This could really impact international collaboration.
It does make you wonder, though, will it actually work? I saw some analysts, Barclays, I think, saying it might actually hurt Hollywood more than help it.
That's a really crucial point. They pointed out the U.S. exports, 3 times more filmed content than it imports? So yeah, hitting imports that hard?
Could have unintended consequences.
Exactly. And think about all the movies shot internationally for cost savings or tax breaks. Canada, the UK, New Zealand.
Like Avatar.
Yeah.
Or that new Fantastic Four movie.
Precisely. New Zealand is apparently quite alarmed, asking if this targets their local industry or just U.S. films shot there.
So it's vague on the details.
A bit. And does it really tackle the reason films go overseas? Like high production costs, labor expenses in the U.S.? Probably not. It seems more like treating a symptom.
Right. And what about the Motion Picture Association? They can't be happy about potentially isolating Hollywood when global audiences are so key now.
You'd think not. It feels counterintuitive.
Could this lead to retaliation? Like a full-blown trade war, but for movies?
It's certainly a possibility floating out there. Okay, shifting over to Asia. Singapore.
What's the news there?
The ruling People's Action Party, the PAP, they just won big in Saturday's general election.
They usually do well, don't they?
They do, but this was significant. They grabbed 87 out of 97 seats, and their popular vote share went up to nearly 66%. That's up from 61% in 2020.
So a strong vote of confidence for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, especially with all the global uncertainty.
Absolutely. It looks like the public backs his economic management, even with rising costs at home. It's seen as confidence in their pretty expansive spending plans, too. Subsidies, housing, infrastructure, the works.
Interesting timing, though, because isn't their growth forecast being downgraded?
It is. The Ministry of Trade just lowered the 2025 forecast to between 0 and 2% growth. That's a big drop from the 4.4% GDP expansion they saw in 2024.
So why this strong support, then?
It seems their big budget, 124 billion Singapore dollars, that's about 95 billion US, things like supermarket vouchers, help for seniors, airport upgrades. It seems to have eased voter anxiety about inflation and jobs.
Makes sense. Singapore's so export-driven, they must feel vulnerable?
Very. They have to constantly balance ties with China, their biggest trade partner, and the U.S., their top source of foreign direct investment, FDI.
Tricky spot.
Yeah. Wong keeps stressing they need to be nimble. The opposition, the Workers' Party, they held onto their 10 seats, no change. So Wong has a fresh mandate, but the challenge is sustaining that confidence with trade slowing down.
Okay, now Taiwan. We're hearing about a huge currency rally.
Yeah, huge is right. The new Taiwan dollar just had its sharpest 2-day rally in decades.
Decades? What's driving that?
Seems like a mix of things. You've got life insurers hedging their U.S. dollar risks, plus a lot of speculation about a future U.S. trade deal, maybe one with currency clauses.
So how much did it jump?
Another 2.5% on Monday. That brought the total 2-day gain to 6.5%. And since early April, it's up nearly 10% against the U.S. dollar.
The kind of appreciation must be making exporters nervous.
Definitely. And insurers, too. Taiwan has a massive trade surplus with the U.S. It was $74 billion in 2024. So there's this underlying fear the U.S. might pressure them to strengthen their currency.
But Taiwan's President Liana is playing that down, right? Saying it wouldn't naturally come up in talks.
He is, and the central bank denies any U.S. Treasury request. But, the market seems to be telling a different story.
What are analysts saying?
Folks at BNP Paribas, for example, think the market moves speak for themselves. Exporters are apparently, quote, panicking. And life insurers, who hold something like $1.7 trillion in overseas assets, mostly U.S. bonds, they're hedging hard.
And the central bank isn't really stepping in much.
Their intervention has been pretty muted, yeah,
Right.
which just fuels the idea that maybe currency is part of the trade discussion behind the scenes.
And this is already hitting their stock market.
Yep. Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, their shares dropped 1.3% Monday. A stronger NT dollar makes their tech exports pricier, eats into profits. It's a big deal for them.
Okay, let's cross over to Europe and the UK. Sounds like the impact of those U.S. tariffs is really starting to be felt there.
It really is. Companies are now trying to quantify the damage. Big multinationals, Nestle, Mercedes-Benz, Unilever, they've all been flagging warnings in their latest updates.
This is following Trump's April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs, the baseline 10%.
That's the one. Plus higher rates for many others. Some of the worst ones are delayed 90 days for talks, but just the uncertainty is having what they call a chilling effect.
I saw the Nestle America CEO said consumer sentiment was already shaky, and this just made it worse.
Exactly. And FactSet data showed European companies mentioned tariffs 223 times in April earnings calls. That's double the mentions from March. Shows how central it's become.
It must be incredibly hard for businesses to plan.
Absolutely. The CEO of IKEA's parent company basically said strategic decisions, like where to build factories, take years, sometimes a decade. You can't just pivot on a dime with this pace of policymaking.
So companies are pulling back.
Some are. Several car makers, Stellantis, Volvo, Mercedes, they've actually withdrawn their financial forecasts. They just don't have visibility. And currency swings aren't helping. Unilever's interim CFO called the recent dollar drop against the euro unprecedented, a major business risk now.
Are companies actively changing plans? Like shifting production?
They're considering it. Primark, the UK retailer, they're doubling their US stores but are apparently thinking about moving production out of China because of this.
Yeah.
But they're waiting for clarity. It's a wait-and-see game for many.
Meanwhile, US-EU trade talks aren't going anywhere fast.
Making very little headway, seems like. Brussels is threatening retaliatory tariffs starting July 8th if there's no deal. The UK is still talking to Washington separately.
But the bottom line is, uncertainty reigns.
Pretty much. Executives are saying investment, M&A activity, it's all on hold until things become more predictable. And the cost of that uncertainty is just going up.
Thanks for that global overview. Let's switch focus now to China. We're hearing reports about shifts in how they manage their foreign exchange reserves.
That's right. Beijing seems to be quietly reshaping its massive pile of reserves. We're talking about $3.2 trillion managed by SAFE, the State Administration of Foreign Exchange.
And this is driven by tensions with the U.S.
Largely, yes. They seem to be strategically moving away from such heavy reliance on U.S. treasuries, diversifying into other things like alternative dollar assets, gold, maybe some non-U.S. holdings.
What sparked this rethink? Anything specific?
Well, one trigger mentioned was when the Trump administration shook up the boards at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac a while back. That apparently got Chinese officials thinking about mortgage-backed securities as potential substitutes for treasuries.
Substitutes.
Treasuries have always been the go-to because they're seen as super safe and easy to trade, liquid. But with rising trade friction, tariffs, and especially after seeing Russia's reserves frozen after the Ukraine invasion in 2022.
So worries about potential sanctions or asset freezes down the line.
Exactly. That seems to be a major driver. The fear of the U.S. potentially weaponizing the financial system.
So what specific changes are they actually making? How much have they reduced Treasury holdings?
SafeView officially cut its Treasury holdings by over 27% between early 2022 and the end of 2024. That's a much faster reduction than before.
And where's that money going instead?
They've reportedly upped their holdings of agency bonds debt from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. These offer similar credit quality to treasuries, but maybe slightly better yields. And they also help shorten the overall duration, the interest rate sensitivity of their U.S. holdings.
Makes sense from a risk perspective. What else?
They're definitely boosting their gold reserves. Gold's now about 6% of their total reserves, up from maybe 2% just a few years back. And there are signs they're trimming exposure to private markets, especially in sensitive areas like U.S. tech.
Sounds like a concerted effort to de-risk and diversify. Are there limits to how far they can go?
Oh, absolutely. The big constraint is just the sheer size and liquidity of the U.S. Treasury market. There's really no other government bond market like it in the world.
So they can't just dump treasuries overnight.
No way. That would cause chaos in the markets and probably hurt their own returns badly. So SAFE strategy looks more like agile maneuvering, trying to balance liquidity, safety, and getting a decent return, all while navigating this geopolitical volatility.
But the fact they're even doing this must be making waves.
For sure. Both Washington and Beijing tend to downplay fears of a big financial clash publicly. But the possibility, however remote, that China might one day use its treasury holdings as leverage. Well, that's enough to make global investors rethink their own positions and maybe diversify too.
Okay, sticking with U.S.-China, let's talk trade war. Any signs of movement there?
Well, some potentially interesting signals. President Trump recently indicated he might eventually be open to lowering tariffs on Chinese goods. Some of those are incredibly high, like 145%.
Did he give any reason?
He mentioned that China seems eager to get back to business, to resume commercial ties.
And China's reaction, they hit back hard last month, didn't they?
They did, with retaliatory duties up to 125% on U.S. stuff. But interestingly, reports suggest they've quietly rolled back maybe a fifth to a quarter of those already.
A quiet concession, perhaps? This tit for tat has been hurting everyone, hasn't it?
Definitely rattled markets, pushed up prices, and you see signs of strain in China's economy too. Their manufacturing PMI showed the fastest contraction since 2023 recently. Export orders plunged.
But maybe some glimmers of diplomacy.
Tiny ones. China's Commerce Ministry apparently mentioned they're sort of elevating the possibility of restarting trade talks. That actually gave U.S. stocks a little boost.
But Trump isn't rushing to the phone.
No, he said he has no immediate plans to talk to Xi Jinping, stressing that any deal needs to be, in his words, a fair deal.
Meanwhile, our business is finding ways around the tariffs.
Seems like it. Chinese exporters are reportedly getting creative with loopholes. Things like origin washing shipping goods through a third country to hide where they really came from, or just falsifying the origin documents.
Is that working?
Sometimes, but customs agencies are catching on. South Korea just uncovered $21 million worth of misdeclared goods, mostly from China heading to the U.S.
And what about Temu, the e-commerce giant?
Big change for them. They're stopping direct shipments from China to the U.S. This is because the de minimis exemption ended that rule, let small packages come in tariff-free. Now there's a new 120% tariff on those small parcels.
Ouch. So how will Temu operate in the U.S. now?
They'll have to fulfill orders using U.S.-based sellers. This could really shrink their U.S. presence and probably hit other low-cost players like Shein too, who relied heavily on that exemption. The future's uncertain, but definitely not quiet.
Yeah, staying with U.S.-China dynamics, but shifting slightly critical materials. Copper, specifically.
Right. This ties into national security concerns for the U.S. Copper demand is surging. People are calling it the new oil. But supply is struggling.
Why the struggle?
Global mine production might peak as soon as 2026. There's a projected deficit of maybe 700,000 tons just in 2025. Basically, there hasn't been enough investment in new mines. And the trade war hasn't helped global supply chains either.
Creates opportunities, though, presumably.
For investors, yes. And the U.S. government is trying to secure domestic supply. The current administration signed executive orders to protect copper mining here. EO 1421 basically flags copper as critical.
And Nevada's a key area for this.
Yeah, Nevada's consistently ranked as a top mining location. There's a company mentioned, Giant Mining Corp, ticker BFGFF. They have a copper, silver, gold project there, reported their best drill results ever last September.
Are they well positioned financially?
Reports say their balance sheet is fully funded for drilling this year. Interestingly, their stock price is down like 50% since early February, maybe due to the general market turmoil. So possibly underpriced.
Do they have existing assets?
They own the Mabuda Hill Copper Project, which actually used to be a producing mine. Management has apparently expanded the deposit over the last 4 years. Historically, it produced quite a bit, 2.8 million pounds of copper, plus silver, gold, even some tin.
Sounds like a potential play, but maybe speculative.
Definitely falls into the speculative category, but potentially high upside given the copper dynamics.
Okay, now a really concerning topic, reports about economic data disappearing in China.
Yeah, this is a big one, highlighted in a recent Wall Street Journal piece. Apparently, China has systematically stopped publishing hundreds of key economic indicators.
Hundreds. Like what?
All sorts of things. Land sales data, foreign investment numbers, detailed unemployment figures, even the number of cremations, business confidence indexes, even things like soy sauce production.
Soy sauce? Why would that disappear?
It sounds odd, but it can be a proxy for consumer activity or restaurant business. The point is, this data blackout seems to be happening right when China's facing major economic headwinds. The property market collapse, youth unemployment problems, trade tensions.
So the timing suggests it's deliberate to control the narrative.
That's what many analysts suspect. It's an effort by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, to manage perceptions as they deal with these mounting pressures.
Can you give some concrete examples?
Sure. National land sales value, crucial for local government revenue, dropped 48% in 2022. That data series. Gone at the start of 2023.
And youth unemployment.
It hit a record 21.3% in 2023. Then they suspended the data release. 5 months later, they came out with a revised rate of 14.9%, but crucially, it excluded full-time students, so
Okay.
not really comparable.
That makes the numbers look better, but it's misleading.
Exactly. Widespread skepticism about that. And the cremation data vanished after the zero-COVID policy ended, despite outside estimates of potentially millions of excess deaths. Other things gone missing. New stock market investors, data from toll road operators, local government debt balances, soybean output.
So how are economists even supposed to figure out what's going on?
It's getting much harder. They're forced to rely on, well, unorthodox proxies. Things like tracking box office numbers, using satellite images to look at nighttime lighting or factory activity, cement production, electricity use, even scraping social media or local news for clues about business closures.
This isn't entirely new, though, is it? Skepticism about official GDP figures has been around for ages.
True. Even former Premier Li Keqiang famously preferred to track things like electricity consumption, freight volumes, and bank lending as more reliable indicators than the headline GDP number.
And the latest GDP figures.
China reported 5% growth for 2024, right on target. But independent groups had much lower estimates. Goldman Sachs said maybe 3.7%. Rhodium Group thought 2.4%. One Chinese economist who suggested around 2% reportedly got silenced.
This lack of transparency must be killing investor confidence.
It certainly doesn't help. Early 2024 saw big outflows. Foreign investors pulled over $2 billion from Chinese stocks in just 2 weeks. And then the Shanghai and Shenzhen exchanges stopped reporting real-time foreign capital flows.
Making it even harder to see what's happening.
Right. And accessing even existing data is getting tougher. A 2021 law restricted access to things like corporate registries and satellite images unless you're in mainland China. Foreign analysts sometimes have to physically go to China just to download data.
It seems like a deliberate strategy of tightening information flow.
That appears to be the case. The party seems particularly sensitive about data related to vulnerable sectors, like the property crisis. Any data hinting at demographic decline or local government financial stress also seems to be tightly controlled or unreliable. It's a growing opacity.
Now, moving from economic data to political dynamics, we're hearing some pretty dramatic reports about potential leadership changes.
Yes, these are significant rumors, though obviously hard to confirm definitively from outside. Reports, mainly from independent commentators citing insider sources, suggest a major power struggle. Talk of a fourth plenum shakeup.
Meaning
There's speculation that veteran party elders have pressured Xi Jinping, potentially forcing him to step down or significantly reduce his power. Ding Xuexiang's name is being floated as a possible next general secretary.
that would be seismic. Why now? What's the reported reason?
The narrative is that these elders, concerned about China's international standing and, crucially, the economic situation, have united to push for a change. They reportedly see Xi's consolidation of power as having gone too far, leading to policy missteps and risks.
Who are these elders?
Uh,
And who is Ding Xuexiang? He's been close to Xi, hasn't he?
The specific elders aren't always named, but think figures with past influence. Hu Jintao, the former president, is apparently not a major player due to health. As for Ding Xuexiang, yes, his career took off under Xi. He ran Xi's office, joined the Politburo. He was seen as a key operator managing Xi's relationship with other factions back in Shanghai.
Was he seen as a successor before?
There was speculation he was being groomed, perhaps to oversee party affairs, but then, reportedly, due to tensions with the public security minister, Xi reassigned him to be executive vice premier. Some analysts saw that as a sort of demotion, putting him in a role needing economic experience he maybe lacked.
And the others rumored for top spots, like Chen Jining for premier.
Chen Jining's background is interesting. Tsinghua University graduate, studied overseas. His factional ties are seen as a bit ambiguous, but Xi Jinping actually recruited him back to Tsinghua when she was party secretary there.
So the report suggests the elders have decided Xi must go, or at least have his power checked.
That's the claim. That a decision has been made for Xi to exit or have his influence significantly reduced by the next party congress, and that his grip on the military might already be weakening. The reported motivation is fear of catastrophic risks if his control remains unchecked.
How would such a transition even happen? Seems fraught with danger.
The suggestion is it would likely be some kind of compromise, a way for Xi, his family, his loyalists to have a relatively dignified exit, avoiding an open internal clash. The outcome, according to groups like Cypher, might be a return to more collective leadership after Xi.
We also heard comments from a former U.S. military official, General Blaine Holt.
Yes, retired General Holt offered a pretty stark assessment. He basically said the CCP is nearing its end and Xi could be its last leader.
What makes him say that?
He pointed to the recent purges within the party and military, over 1,300 officials, more than 80 generals. Crucially, he says these purges are now targeting Xi's own loyalists. He suggests this indicates a powerful counterforce, maybe led by Zhang Youxia, the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission.
He even mentioned prophecies.
He did. He referenced an old Tang dynasty prophecy that some experts interpret as predicting a coup and assassination during Xi's rule involving a warrior with a golden sword, which some connect to Zhang Youxia. Holt claims Xi and the CCP are actually quite preoccupied with these kinds of predictions.
Wow. Holt also painted a grim picture of China's economy, didn't he?
Extremely grim. He talked about the economy being in free fall, high unemployment, businesses shutting down, capital flight, growing dissent. He claims over 10,000 factories closed since Trump's second term started, creating ghost towns.
Who does he blame for this?
He blames Xi directly. The COVID lockdowns, policy U-turns, money printing, the property bust, failing banks, the surveillance state. He argues the decline started well before Trump returned. He also suggests the CCP might try to use the trade tensions as a scapegoat or even start military action to distract.
So he sees Trump's tariffs as strategically important.
Very much so. A calculated strike while Xi is vulnerable economically and politically. Holt believes the U.S. has a chance to, in his view, cripple the CCP by cutting off access to the U.S. market. He urged Trump to stand firm.
Did Holt comment on China's global tactics?
Yeah, he accused the CCP of using infiltration, extortion, bribery, disappearing critics, and manipulating Western media. He thinks Beijing arrogantly assumes its U.S. debt holdings and military power will make America back down. But he also noted that Beijing has made quiet concessions, like scaling back those retaliatory tariffs we mentioned. He warned not to underestimate a cornered regime, though.
Gordon Chang, another frequent China critic, also weighed in.
Yes, Gordon Chang echoed many of these points, especially about the disappearing economic data. He sees it as a deliberate attempt by the CCP to hide the truth because they don't want the world or their own people to know how bad things really are.
He agrees the economy is contracting.
Undeniably, in his view. He pointed to the falling consumer prices, the weak PMI data. He thinks the downturn is accelerating, and the regime is paralyzed by ideology, refusing to take effective action. He predicts a persistent economic collapse, saying any emergency measures will likely fail because CCP politics are suffocating the economy.
There was also mention of another analyst highlighting doubts about GDP figures.
Right. Tao Jing-X, an international arbitrator, wrote in the FT that many believe recent GDP numbers are inflated because local officials feel immense pressure to meet targets for their own careers. It reinforces that long-standing skepticism about the reliability of official statistics.
Okay, one last piece on China, this campaign by anti-communist groups.
Yes, quite a vocal campaign launched by overseas groups like the China Democracy and Human Rights Alliance. They held a rally in New York under the banner Demand the CCP Kneel.
Kneel, that's strong language.
Very. They issued an open letter, an emergency order, calling for the CCP to kneel. This is all happening amidst the heightened trade tensions. The CCP responded defiantly with a video saying, "China will not kneel," which apparently drew a lot of ridicule online.
What's the core argument of the campaign?
They argue the CCP's power, built on exploiting cheap labor, is crumbling. Industries failing, economy stagnating. They say the regime is resorting to whipping up nationalism, comparing the wolf warrior diplomats to desperate dogs. They also accuse the CCP of secretly kneeling, already giving up territory, moving wealth abroad, sending spies.
And they demand the CCP kneel before
a huge list of victims of CCP rule, going all the way back to its origins. It's an incredibly long and detailed list. Victims of the Civil War, landowners, elites purged, famine victims, they cite 43 million, intellectuals in labor camps, Cultural Revolution victims, Tiananmen victims, Falun Gong practitioners, organ harvesting victims, COVID victims globally, victims of transnational repression. The list goes on and on.
a comprehensive indictment.
Yes. They also demand kneeling before those who resisted the CCP and before universal values, democracy, rule of law, human rights as a path to reconciliation. They warn of a judgment day.
What's the thinking behind this tactic? Do they expect the CCP to actually kneel?
Young Maine, who wrote the declaration, told the Epoch Times he thinks the CCP's "We Will Not Kneel" response is just for domestic consumption. He claims it's actually signaling a coming retreat, preparing the Little Pinks, a term for young nationalists. He even claims the CCP quietly lifted $40 billion in U.S. tariffs before May Day as a sign of capitulation.
So he sees it as political theater.
He calls it pure theater, arguing the CCP came to power via propaganda and survives by deceit, and that its defiance rings hollow when, in his view, 1 billion Chinese are forced to kneel under state power daily. The rally in Flushing, New York featured chants like, "Down with the CCP, Xi Jinping step down, build a new China."
Quite a lot happening regarding China. Thanks for breaking that down. Let's pivot now to the S2 Underground update. What's the bottom line up front for May 5th?
Okay, the S2 summary highlights a probable revenge killing of a police officer in Ohio, a likely attempted revenge killing in Indiana, the White House saying there's no timeline for releasing the Epstein documents, and Israel announcing plans for a complete occupation of Gaza.
Let's start with the Middle East, Israel and Gaza.
Reports from Israeli media say Netanyahu's cabinet approved plans to seize complete control of Gaza. Local outlets also report another large call-up of reservists, tens of thousands.
Complete control. And what about the population?
The stated goal, according to these reports, is quite stark: completely displace the entire surviving non-Israeli population. This sounds different, more permanent than past occupations.
What are the likely immediate impacts?
The S2 analysis suggests we'll probably see more Houthi attacks, maybe escalation in the Syria proxy war. Iran itself isn't expected to do much directly.
And Hezbollah.
Unlikely to do much either, though maybe some symbolic indirect rocket fire from Lebanon is possible.
Does this connect to anything else?
It might hint at why there were those recent reports about White House Pentagon infighting over a potential war with Iran. Perhaps Israel doesn't feel it has the full U.S. backing it might want for that broader conflict right now.
So focusing on Gaza might be their main play? Or could it be a distraction?
Both are possible. Announcing plans to clean out that whole thing, as Trump once put it regarding Gaza, could mean they'll be tied up there. But given U.S. military positioning in the region, using it as a feint while preparing something against Iran can't be ruled out entirely.
Okay, back to the U.S. Washington, D.C., something about a House resolution.
Yeah, House Resolution 867. It aimed to change parts of U.S. law dealing with wartime trade Title 50, Sections 4841 and 4842. The goal seemed to be restricting Americans' ability to boycott certain nations or groups.
Boycotts, like BDS.
The sponsor listed was One Nation Israel, so that connection seems likely. The vote got postponed, probably due to expected backlash, similar to the controversy around the Anti-Boycott Act of 2018.
What exactly would H.R. 867 have changed?
Technically, it wanted to insert the term International Government Organization, or IGO, right after foreign country, in one section. What that practically means is a bit murky because the original law is vague, but adding IGOs could potentially broaden its reach.
Right. And the Epstein files?
Yeah.
Any movement?
Nope. White House press conference just said no specific timeline for release. The S2 analyst commentary is pretty blunt. After the whole binder scandal, don't expect a full release. Maybe some old stuff gets re-released, but the client list likely stays private.
Okay, let's turn to these disturbing incidents. Ohio.
In Cincinnati, sadly, a police officer was murdered. It appears to be a revenge killing. A traffic control officer was deliberately hit by a vehicle Friday near the University of Cincinnati.
And the driver.
Identified as Rodney Hinton Jr. He's the father of Ryan Hinton, a young black man who was shot and killed by police the day before, on Thursday, apparently after drawing a gun while in a stolen vehicle.
This is confirmed.
Details are limited to avoid inflaming things, but local reports say Rodney Hinton was actually shown the body cam footage of his son's shooting, and it seemed to confirm the police account. He then left the station and allegedly killed this officer.
Was it one of the officers involved in his son's death?
Unlikely. Probably a random officer acting out of immediate grief and anger. The officers involved in the original shooting would almost certainly be on administrative leave. Security for them must be extremely high right now.
Just tragic. And Indiana, another potential revenge situation.
Seems possible. A man was shot and killed at the Hendricks County Courthouse this morning after drawing a gun on officers during an inmate transfer. 2 officers fired.
Do we know why he might have done that?
Still unclear, but local media connected the dots. The man shot was reportedly the great-grandfather of 2 young children who were tragically killed during a police chase back in February.
Remind us about that February incident.
A man named Sidani Pettis was driving a stolen car with two infants inside, led police on a high-speed chase, crashed. One baby died, the other was critically injured. Pettis himself was already on probation after getting a plea deal on earlier attempted murder charges.
And Pettis had a hearing today.
Yes, related to that February crash. So one theory is the great-grandfather was there seeking revenge against law enforcement. Another possibility, maybe less likely, is he was trying to help Pettis escape. Authorities are being cautious, don't want to encourage vigilantism. We probably won't get many details quickly.
Extremely concerning situations. Thank you for that update. Finally, let's move to other major United States news. And this sounds huge. Boeing.
Yeah, this is a bombshell report originating from the Auto Central YouTube channel. Boeing has apparently announced it's shutting down all its U.S. factories and relocating operations overseas.
All of them. That's
Yeah.
staggering. Why is this linked to the tariffs?
Directly. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg reportedly cited the brutal reality of cost under President Trump's new tariff regime. He basically said the tariffs make Boeing's planes too expensive for foreign buyers, isolating U.S. manufacturing instead of protecting it.
So the protectionist policy backfired, in their view.
That's the argument. Ortberg acknowledged they've made progress ramping up production lately, but said the basic economics under the tariffs just don't work for a global company like Boeing anymore. Staying in the U.S. is seen as unsustainable. He framed it as a painful but necessary move for survival and global relevance, a direct reaction to government policy.
The impact on American workers, it's hard to even comprehend.
It's devastating. Tens of thousands of skilled jobs in Washington State, South Carolina, Missouri, all across the country. It's not just the direct jobs, it's the suppliers, the local businesses, the schools in those communities. A massive blow.
And for the broader U.S. economy.
Yeah.
Beyond the job losses.
It's huge. Boeing is a cornerstone of American industry, a key defense contractor, a major exporter. This decision completely undermines the narrative about bringing manufacturing back and the signal it sends to other multinationals. It could trigger a wider reassessment, maybe even a larger exodus.
What about globally? Who benefits from this?
The countries where Boeing eventually sets up shop, potentially Southeast Asia, Europe, Latin America, maybe they stand to gain massively. Investment, technology transfer, high-skilled jobs, geopolitical leverage, it's a game changer for them.
And the U.S. supply chain.
It forces a massive reorientation. U.S. suppliers might have to follow Boeing abroad or risk becoming irrelevant. The U.S. really risks losing its dominant position as the center of aerospace innovation.
This must raise serious national security questions, too.
Absolutely critical ones. Boeing builds so many vital defense systems, military planes, satellites, space tech. Even if some defense work stays, moving major manufacturing overseas raises huge questions about protecting sensitive technology, intellectual property. It could weaken supply chain resilience, our ability to ramp up production in an emergency. It throws future government-industry partnerships into doubt, too.
How are investors taking this? It must be causing chaos for Boeing stock.
Reports say reactions are mixed, lots of volatility. Some might see it as a necessary, if harsh, business decision to stay competitive globally given the tariffs. Others will see it as a terrifying sign of instability in the U.S. business climate, questioning the wisdom of investing in American industry right now.
And the symbolism, Boeing is such an American icon.
Exactly. It represents technological achievement, national pride, American leadership. Seeing it leave, it's deeply unsettling. It forces a really uncomfortable conversation for policymakers. Tariffs meant to reshore jobs seemingly did the exact opposite in this massive case. It screams for a more nuanced economic strategy.
Unions must be furious.
Outraged and despairing, according to reports. They see American workers paying the price for political decisions. It's a huge blow to organized labor, to the communities built around Boeing for generations.
What are some other long-term ripple effects we should think about?
Well, competitors, Airbus, Embraer, maybe China, Russia, they'll see a huge opportunity. Financial institutions will have to reassess risk. Boeing's own corporate culture, so tied to America, will transform. The political fallout is just starting. The logistics of moving operations on this scale are mind-boggling, likely causing delays and disrupting airlines. It's a powerful, maybe cautionary tale about unintended consequences.
Wow. That's an incredible amount to process across the board today, from tariffs shaking up Hollywood and global industry to deep shifts in China's economy and politics, worrying domestic incidents, and now this potential Boeing earthquake.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? The ripple effects are global. What really jumped out at you from all this today?
Honestly, the Boeing story is just staggering in its potential impact, the sheer scale of it, and what it says about the current trade environment. But also, that deep dive into China, the disappearing data, the political rumors, the economic fragility described, it paints a very complex and potentially volatile picture.
It certainly does. Thinking about all these rapid shifts, economic, political, industrial, salutary, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of unexpected events might we see unfold as we move through the rest of 2025?
That is definitely something to keep in mind. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into today's critical updates.